Thank you, Chair. I want to say this is one of those topics that I'm deeply concerned about with as trying to pursue a good quality outcome, let's say, versus the date and the time pressures that we're presently talking about and acknowledging that we're under. And if I think about, for example, 24, the word that's been used is overcapacity, and share that view. I look at junction 11, and I'm also conscious, sorry, of the M42, and I'm also conscious of 13, I think it is. And there's an awful lot of housing development that we've already voted on and that we've suggested is right or not. And I've certainly had a big old say on that. Now we're looking at putting this, 1.09 million square meters on top. Now, the transport, I mean, we've talked about transport modelling, and I know there's a huge pushback from all residents about we don't have the road infrastructure, and it's always top 3, top 4 of what people suggest. I think people assume that as councillors, we've just gone, well, we just want these things here, and therefore we get whatever cars we get. And again, we know it's not the case. We're reliant on you telling us that, yes, the transport modelling says that this is going to be okay. Now, if we've already had votes around these junctions on some pretty massive housing developments, I appreciate not on the scale of Norton Heath yet, but, they're massive. The transport modelling that's been associated with them, we're now saying we're going to stick however many HGVs on top of that. And we're still saying that it's okay, that the junctions can cope. We talked about junction capacity was one of the things that's in the report, access to labour being another. Sort of makes me think that, well, if we're just developing places in the countryside, like at junction 11, for example, where it's predominantly countryside, I appreciate now you probably don't describe junction 24, sadly, as being countryside, just because of the sheer amount of expansion that's gone on around there. Ashby probably sits somewhere in the middle of those two statements. I kind of get to the point with this where I think, well, we want a local plan. We have to protect ourselves with the local plan. But if the information that we're being given to try and make these decisions is so spurious and is moved, the dial upon which is moved tenfold, I mean, it's got to be tenfold on the amount of movements that we're now talking about at junction 11 on the at the M42. How is that right? I mean, how are we then saying we're going to put extra houses around that area as well? Like, where do these things come together? What I want is some reassurance that this isn't just, well, we made that decision and that's okay. And now we're looking at making this decision, but we're under massive time pressure. We don't really understand what's going on with the transport modelling. We certainly don't know how to vary the transport modelling. Where's it going? I want that reassurance. I want to be able to talk to residents and explain that as committee members, what we've done is we've made the best decision we can. This is the best decision that we can make, and this is why. I want that understanding. Can you give me that?
I'll try. So, in terms of the transport modelling, what that has done and is doing is building in all the developments that have been agreed so far as part of the local plan process. So, for example, all the housing allocations, yes. In terms of, and also it's built in employment sites that have previously been agreed. We've actually gone back a few stages on the transport modelling to take account of the outcome from this work and what is proposed in this report, because the assumptions that had been made up to now about how much of this strategic distribution Northwest Leicestershire would have to take was much less than is in the report. So we've actually gone back more than a couple of steps, and it will delay the transport modelling. We should have had that end of November. It will now be into January. Christmas in the way doesn't help there. So that will look at everything in the round. It also takes account of what is already known elsewhere, so from outside of Northwest Leicestershire. What it won't do, and I do need to be clear about this, is what it won't take into account is things like the development at Norton Juxta Twycross that's been put forward as part of the Hinckley local plan, because that's not sufficiently advanced at this stage. And this is where it gets tricky, because we will do the transport modelling. It'll be based on what we know now. At examination in 18 months' time, the world could look very different. And that is just the thing that we just have to try and cope with through the process. But in terms of what this council is proposing as part of the local plan, it is factored into the transport modelling. We'll just have to see what the results show us.
Thanks for that, Ian. So I think whether or not they end up getting 10,000 houses at Norton Heath, clearly that's something that they're suggesting, and we'll come on to that topic later. It's probably reasonable to suggest that the likelihood is that the correct phrase? I don't want to say anything I'm not supposed to say from a legal point of view, but is there going to be nothing? I think I'd be surprised. Let's put it that way. I'd be surprised if there was nothing developed around that area. And there seems to be suggestions of, depending on where you look, 2,000 houses, 2,500 houses. It's still, when you compare to what we've been talking about, it's still big numbers that are being floated. So for us to say, well, we're not including 10,000 houses, I should say. Sorry, there's 20,000 car movements is in my head. The idea that is going to be factual, the idea that we're putting our residents in our catchment area around that, the Snareston, Swepston, Appleby, Measham group of villages and further across as well, they're going to, we're suggesting that we're going to put something in here which is going to put, we don't know the vehicle movements involved with the scale of warehousing that we're talking. Perhaps you can enlighten me on that, but it must be huge numbers that we're talking about. How can we be realistic that if our section of this undeveloped, I mean, we've talked a lot about, and this is where the date thing comes in, we've talked a lot about junction 24A and the improvements that are required there. There's been huge projects gone on to assess that, and we've had member briefings about what that might look like. No such things happened at junction 11 of the M42. That leaves me feeling that we're underprepared for the residents that are going to be impacted with these massive developments. Now, we're only talking about us and Hinckley and Bosworth in this moment in time, but I think members need to be aware that at that site, you've also got North Warwickshire Council, South Derbyshire Council. There must be a Staffordshire one that's associated with it as well. And we're all in the same game. We're all playing with the same ball in terms of trying to allocate these houses, the warehousing. I'm sure we're all being told the same things. We've got access to the land in the same area. If it's a 5 to 10 minute drive, all of these areas are in. The fact that, as has already been highlighted, we're not communicating very well with Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire for the size of 24. I appreciate it's so much bigger with the airport, but we're moving in that direction. The last thing I would like to see is the next council that comes forward, based on our work, sit there and make the comments that have been made tonight about 24, where it is at over capacity. And I feel like that's the direction of travel. On that basis, as much as I know that we have to find this warehousing allocation, my instinct says, how much of this are we going to take? Where do we draw the line here? And where do we insist that the process is changed, that we can work better with those people to get the transport modelling where it needs to be on a much grander scale? Because at the moment, I want to support this because I want to see a local plan go through. That's the only reason I want to support this. I don't feel like I'm making a decision based on clinical information. And I'd be surprised if others felt the same way. It seems very spurious.
I think a lot of this comes down to the lack of planning at a strategic level. That's let's be clear, that is what is missing in the planning system at the present time. We could go into the reasons for that, but there's no point to do so. That is what we have to deal with. Again, in terms of what we're doing through the transport modelling work, we're building in the best available information we can to try and understand what the implications of development might be. And certainly junction 11 of the 42. It will be interesting to see what those results show. But until we've got those, it's impossible to say, and I wouldn't really want to speculate any more than that. But I understand your frustrations, and certainly as an officer, I share some of those. Things aren't as joined up as they might be. That's the nature of the planning system that we have to work with, unfortunately.